everyone, and welcome back to another Mad Meta Magic, where we try to make the magic meta mad. Today, we have a deck that I'm pretty sure was brewed up by RGNK Phoenix and was requested by Six Sigma, so thank you to you both for bringing this to my attention. But this is a deck that's called Lorehold Gorios. So the idea with this deck is we try and get Velomachus Lorehold or Obsidat the Ghost Council into the grave, and then Goryo's Vengeance to reanimate it. So Velomachus, provided he hits the battlefield, should hit one of our extra combat step spells, like World at War or Savage Beating, and basically win the game through infinite combat steps, very similar to how the old Narset Reanimator deck worked, except he has Vigilance and Haste by himself. So, whereas Narset, I think, had Hexproof and Haste, but not Vigilance. So, he's a little bit sturdier, I think. Yeah, because he's got flying, so like if your opponent has like some cheap blockers, they can't just block down your Narset equivalent. We have a bunch of support related to this. We have Merchant of the Veil, Thrilling Discovery, Lightning Axe as our discard, or self-discard package. We also have Thoughtseize, Fatal Push to interact with our opponent. Nahiri is kind of our top-end secondary backup plan. So if we're not using the Reanimate spell, we can actually just Nahiri, start looting away spells until we get to like an Unburial Rites or Velomachus. We can also ult her, go get Velomachus and win the game. Out of the sideboard, we have Leylines of Sanctity to protect ourselves, Silence versus counter spells, Collective Brutality for additional duress, /drain, /kill early dorks. We have Through the Breach, kind of as a secondary backup plan. Blood Moons, not sure this is the greatest mana base for Blood Moons, but I guess it could work. We also have a Rip Apart, and then finally an Emrakul. Honestly, the Emrakul plan, probably what we should be on with Nahiri, Merchant of the Veil, Lightning Axe, and Goryo's Vengeance and stuff, but it's a lot less fun, that's for sure. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and take this into a Constructed League, and I'll see you guys in round one. Alright, well we technically have everything we need to reanimate Velomachus. I'm not super big on this hand, though, so we're going to mulligan. I'd like to try something a little bit faster. Okay, well, we've got Thoughtseize, a Lightning Axe to get Velomachus into the grave. We have Thrilling Discovery to help cycle, provided we draw white mana. I think I'm going to keep this and put back Savage Beating. It's a little risky, but our opponent's definitely not going to guess what deck we're playing. So our opponent is Eldrazi-tron. We'll take Chalice. Pass the turn. Opponent untaps, probably going to lead on Power Plant. We would really like to draw a Sacred Foundry. We untap. We draw another Thrilling Discovery. That's not what we wanted. Pass the turn. Opponent does have Scavenger Grounds in their opener, so they do have Grave Hate, something we have to be aware of. So yeah, the ideal hand for this actually wins on turn 2 with like a turn 1 haggle away of Velomachus, and then Goryo's it back. So we untap. We draw Bloodstained Mire. Play Bloodstained Mire. And let's go ahead and fetch. So my opponent could just play and activate Scavenger Grounds here, which is kind of the problem. So what we're going to do is discard Thrilling Discovery and Velomachus. Perfect. Opponent untaps. They play Scavenger Grounds, and if they just... Yeah, okay. Cool. Play Godless Shrine, untapped. So now if my opponent were to activate Scavenger Grounds at any point... we could just get back Velomachus. Or like if they play a creature next turn, we could Lightning Axe it, even if they activate Scavenger Grounds this turn. Okay, opponent's going to Warping Whale. Sure. They get a token. They untap. They play a Power Plant, so they can play Karn this turn. They can also play Reality Smasher. They play Reality Smasher. So opponent goes to combat and attacks. We are going to cast with additional cost. Discard a card. Discard Velomachus. Discard Velomachus. Okay. On their end step, let's go ahead and get back Velomachus. This just gives us more mana on our turn. We untap. We draw Blackleaf Cliffs. Go to combat. Attack for 5. We flip. We do get Savage Beating and World at War. You can cast 1, right? Yeah, okay. So we're going to go ahead and cast with Entwine. Because that gives him double strike, and we really only need to swing one more time. Okay? Then we go to combat, and attack, and the game is over. Sweet, so you only have to hit one Savage Beating for him to actually be lethal. That's actually really sick. I didn't even think about that. Nice. Okay, so we're against Eldrazi Tron. What do we need here? I think we kind of want Blood Moons, Rip Aparts, Through the Breach. We may want Leyline because of Thought Not Seer. Fatal Push actually seems a bit bad here. I'm going to take out Unburial Rites because I think it's going to be too slow. I don't mind Thoughtseize. Obsidat kind of actually seems bad in this matchup, so I'm going to cut Obsidat. And, you know, I'll cut one Thoughtseize. Let's try it like this, and maybe we play the Leyline next game, maybe we don't. Maybe we win. Alright. So yeah, if you reanimate Velomachus on your opponent's end step, and then you untap and play Savage Beating, you can entwine it for 2 mana, and then that kills your opponent in 1 hit. That's pretty sick. This is a mulligan. This is a little bit better because it does have Rip Apart and 2 colors of mana, or all 3 colors of mana, I mean. Okay, we're going to keep this hand. I'm going to put back Savage Beating and 1 Velomachus. We just need a way to discard here. I mean, technically we have it off of Nahiri, right? Opponent leads on Power Plant, plays Relic. No fair. You can't just deny me my fun. Play Sacred Foundry tapped, pass the turn. Opponent untaps. They play a tower. This is concerning. We untap and get Lightning Axe. So, play Bloodstained Mire, pass the turn. The reason that we're playing Bloodstained Mire here over Blackleaf Cliffs is if my opponent plays an Eldrazi Temple into a Thought Knot Seer here, they're not going to have mana to pop Relic, but they can still tap it. We can put an additional card in the graveyard and make sure we still get Velomachus. Doesn't look like that will be necessary, though. Okay, crack Bloodstained Mire. They'll make us exile it. Sure. Bloodstained Mire, gonna get us a Blood Crypt. Tapped. We untap. Draw another Goryo's Vengeance. Play Blackleaf Cliffs. Pass the turn. Well, if we draw another untapped land, we can play Nahiri. And Nahiri is fairly decent against Eldrazi Tron, I would imagine. Okay, opponent plays Blast Zone into Karn Great Creator. Okay. So opponent is going to Wish. They get Ensnaring Bridge. So we untap. We draw Through the Breach. Also good backup plan. Nahiri is going to have to take care of that bridge, though. Opponent untaps. I had kind of anticipated that they would play a creature. So I guess if they're just on 4 lands into Karn, Gravehate, it's kind of an issue. Opponent wishes again. This time is probably Liquid Metal Coating. It is. Opponent plays Power Plant, plays Coating. Okay, I think that means we're actually done here. Because they can shut off Nahiri before we can activate, or not before we can activate her, but they can keep her locked down for long enough that they can start blowing up lands and things. Kind of want the Thoughtseize back in the deck, just in case I need to Thoughtseize my opponent. I think I'm actually going to drop a Blood Moon, and we're going to try it like this. Silence would actually be pretty funny tech against my opponent, because it's basically Time Walk against Tron decks, because they play almost no instants. So we have a Lightning Axe, we have Velomachus, no reanimation spell. I think this is a mulligan. Ooh, this is not a lot better. Question is it good enough? I think with the Thoughtseize, I'm actually tempted enough to keep this. If I have to hardcast Merchant and start drawing extra cards, that's fine. Okay, opponent mulligan to 6. So let's go ahead and Thoughtseize. Mine, Power Plant, Tower, and Map. I think we actually take Ballista here. Smasher we can hopefully Axe. Opponent leads on Power Plant. Plays Map, presumably. Yep, okay. We untap, we draw a Lightning Axe, play Sacred Foundry tapped. I might Merchant of the Veil to loot away a Lightning Axe. I'm going to play Mine here. They might map for a Scavenger Grounds. I could totally see that being a thing. Okay. So let's go ahead and haggle. Discard a Lightning Axe. We get a Goryo's Vengeance. Untap. We draw another Merchant of the Veil. Play Bloodstained Mire. The problem is with Lightning Axe, I have to discard my whole hand. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to fetch, get a basic Swamp, and play Merchant out of exile. Because if they're just playing Smasher next turn, that's not too scary for one turn. And we are one draw away... We are Velomachus away from winning, effectively. They did map for Scavenger Grounds. Okay. But opponent has to choose between Tron, which, I mean, I think is the correct choice here. We kind of need to draw Velomachus immediately. If we do, we win. If we don't, we're kind of in trouble. Because then my opponent can just leave up Scavenger Grounds. They play Thought-Knots here. Okay, that's a problem. I mean, I think they take Lightning Axe. It's our only discard outlet. They take Goryo's Vengeance. I don't think that was correct, but I'm not an expert on either of these decks, really. Opponent playing something else, 3 mana or less. Another map. They activate the other map. I mean, if we get a Blood Moon here, it's kind of funny, but I took one of them out, so I only have one in the deck. They get Seagate Wreckage. We untap. We draw Rip Apart. So, cast this, discarding Rip Apart. We get to draw Thrilling Discovery, which we can't activate the ability of. Go to combat. Attack for 2. Okay, they play Scavenger Grounds. So here comes the Smasher. They go to combat. They're going to hit us for 5. Okay. We go to 10. I think I'm more interested in potentially casting Thrilling Discovery here. Because I kind of need to cycle away a lot of these cards. We draw Goryo's Vengeance. Does that change things? I think it does. So I can haggle away Thrilling Discovery, but then I lose all of my cycling ability. So discard Thrilling Discovery. We do find Velomachus. Go to combat. Hit our opponent for 2. Well, if I can find another instant speed way to discard... if I can find a Lightning Axe, or even a Thoughtseize, I think, I could potentially do this on my opponent's end step. It's not a guarantee, though. And if my opponent has a Thought-Knot-Seer here, we're in trouble. Okay. I can't actually beat that. Especially because our artifact removal is Rip Apart, and it is 2 mana. So unfortunately we lose the match, but I think I made some questionable decisions that round. I'll see you guys in round 2. Alright, round 2 we're against a Luris deck, and we're very close here. We have the discard. We have the reanimation spell, just no Velomachus. You know what? I'm going to keep, on the off chance I'm playing against Mill. Odds are this is actually Death Shadow, and they're just going to lead on Thoughtseize, take Goryo's turn 1. They did mulligan to 6. And they let on Bauble, so this is almost certainly Death Shadow. They crack Bauble. They play Misty and pass. We untap. They draw a card. We draw a Lightning Axe. Play Bloodstained Mire, pass the turn. Okay, they fetch up a Zagoth Triome. Then untap. This could be that Luris Graveyard Control deck, at which point we're probably not winning. Because Silence is not enough versus that deck. Opponent plays Sunken Ruins. Okay, fetch Bloodstained Mire, get a Blood Crypt. Tapped. We untap. They draw a card. We draw Blackcleave Cliffs. Play Sunbaked Canyon, pass the turn. Opponent untaps. Plays a Misty. Plays a Mishra's Bauble. Cracks Bauble, looks at our top deck. Then they pass. We untap. They draw. Then we draw. Play Blackcleave Cliffs. Pass the turn. Opponent cracks Misty. Probably gets an island and then like Archmage's Charm to draw cards. They get an island. Wow, I'm psychic. Okay. They untap. Back to 7 cards in hand. They play an island. I wonder if I can just play a deck of all uncounterable creatures. Let's see what happens versus a deck like this. We untap. Get a Savage Beating. Play Arid Mesa. Crack Arid Mesa. Let's get a Plains. Play Nahiri. Because we gotta cast something eventually. So here comes the Cryptic. Once again, I am psychic. Pass the turn. Opponent untaps. They play a Sunken Hollow. 5 mana. Bring to Light. Oh, it's Valky. That's right. So this deck is basically just Dimir control, and then they play Valky. So this was our one opportunity to draw and activate Velomachus, and we didn't. So we're going to go ahead and scoop. Okay, so versus our opponent, we want Collective Brutality, Silence, and Emrakul. We're going to cut Unburial Rites. Fatal Pushes do almost nothing. And we're going to cut some World at Wars. Pass the turn. I could bring in Through the Breach. Actually, I definitely should bring in Through the Breach over the last World at War. Savage Beating appears to just be strictly better than World at War most of the time. I think World at War is the only other... Actually, no. There's a extra combat step effect that's 5 mana, red-white hybrid, and has Retrace. It could be 6 mana. I don't remember the name of the card, or I would go check. But Savage Beating is definitely the effect we want if we're going to be playing that effect. Which we are, because it's an instant-kill combo with Velomachus. Okay. We need white mana, but we should have plenty of time to get there. I will keep. Play Blackcleave Cliffs, pass the turn. Opponent untaps. They play a Misty. We untap. Draw another Silence. Play a Swamp, pass the turn. I'm keeping Valakut Awakening in hand because I might actually cast it. Because we would wheel away Emrakul and probably a Silence if we can. Like, opponent fetches up a Zagoth Triome. Plays an island. Passes. We untap. Draw Gorios. Alright, well we're going to need the 3rd land. Pass the turn. So I guess the plan is to now discard to hand size and draw white mana. Because then on my opponent's end step we could try silencing into a Goryo's Vengeance. We draw Velomachus. Pass the turn. Opponent Archmage's Charm. They untap. They play an island. And they play Nile Spellbomb. So there goes that idea. We untap. We draw up to 8 cards. Pass the turn. Discard Velomachus. Opponent untaps. They play a Polluted Delta. And they pass. We untap. Draw Nahiri. Okay. Pass the turn. This kind of reveals a little bit too much about what's going on here, but we have to discard, I think, Savage Beating. Okay. Opponent untaps. They either have to get impatient with this Nile Spellbomb, which there's no reason for them to, while, like, tapping out for a Bring to Light, but the odds of my opponent randomly deciding to do that are so incredibly low that we're probably have just lost. We draw a Merchant of the Veil. Alright, pass the turn. This time I'm going to discard Nahiri. Or I guess I could discard Thrilling Discovery, because we have no white mana. So yeah, if my opponent, like, activates Nile Spellbomb, we need, like, another land and another Goryo's. We draw Savage Beating. Pass the turn. Riveting Magic gameplay right now. Discard Savage Beating. Opponent untaps. They play Bauble. They crack Bauble looking at our top deck. I did not bring in the Artifact Hate, because I didn't think we'd be playing against Nile Spellbomb. We untap, opponent draws. We finally draw Plains. So play a Plains. Play Nahiri. Opponent Logic Knot X1. Sure. Opponent untaps. If they didn't have that Spellbomb, we could potentially silence into Haggle, Reanimate Velomachus. But that Spellbomb is kind of ruining our day right now. Okay, we're getting Valky'd. Just regular old front half Valky, which is somehow still relevant in my opponent's deck. Oh, I dislike this card so much. I mean, you would definitely take Velomachus, I think. Because you actually have the mana, you could turn Valky into Velomachus. And then what would I do, right? Yep. Okay. We untap. Draw Bloodstained Mire. Play Bloodstained Mire. Pass the turn. Opponent plays a Sunken Ruin. Goes to combat, attacks us for 2. No blocks, take 2, we go to 18. So we'll go and fetch up a Sacred Foundry. Not going to pay any life for it. Untap. Kind of hoping for a second Vengeance. But we're not finding that right now. Okay. Pass the turn. Okay. They're going to transform Valky. Okay. This sucks. Because there's nothing we can do about it. Opponent untaps. They play a bauble. They bauble us. Go to combat. Attack us for 5. If we had like another arcane spell, we could try splicing Goryo's Vengeance, like if we were playing Desperate Ritual, or Through the Breach, I suppose. I'm pretty sure I did bring in a Through the Breach, so maybe I'm supposed to try and Goryo's here. Opponent casts nothing. We get hit for 12. Okay, I'm going to stop on my opponent's end step and silence. Okay, they let silence happen. So we will attempt to Goryo's. This should trigger the spell bomb. Okay, this is fine. Opponent does not pay the mana. Okay, so after that goes off, we're going to go ahead and haggle away our Velomachus. So we kind of need to draw extra cards here. Goryo's fails. We untap. They draw. Then we draw. Thoughtseize. So Thoughtseizes our opponent with 8 cards in hand. Yes, I see. I'm not even going to play this out. Yeah, we just couldn't do anything. Silence is so much worse than Veil of Summer, it's not even funny. Which sucks, because Silence is, I guess, more fun to play on average when you're playing it. I don't know. I'll see you guys in round 3. Alright, round 3. And I think this is a mulligan. This is a lot better. We have a Thoughtseize, then we can Thrilling Discovery to try and find our reanimation spell. Opponent Inquisitions us. Presumably they take Thoughtseize. They take the Draw 3 spell. Okay. Well, I kind of regret putting the other one back. We draw Fatal Push. Let's go ahead and Thoughtseize our opponent. And they appear to be Jund, so take Assassin's Trophy. Pass the turn. Opponent untaps. They play Raging Ravine. We untap. Draw Savage Beating. Play Arid Mesa. Pass the turn. Opponent untaps. They play a Forest. Another Inquisition, huh? Alright, fetch up a Sacred Foundry and pass the turn. I think they take Lightning Axe, because that's our only other discard outlet. There's actually some notion I maybe should have Thoughtseized myself, but with Assassin's Trophy it wouldn't have mattered. I do regret putting back this other Thrilling Discovery, though. We draw Valakut Awakening, which I am going to play as Valakut Stoneforge. Pass the turn. Opponent untaps. They draw Wooded Foothills and pass. We untap. We draw Thoughtseize. You know what? Thoughtseize myself. Yeah, this is a lot worse if they play Scavenging Ooze or anything like that, but opponent gets to see the remaining 2 cards in my hand, and we don't have black mana. If my opponent decides to animate Raging Ravine, pass the turn. But this leaves us live to a top deck Goryo's. It is unlikely that our opponent has instant speed removal currently that could kill Velomachus, but the longer the game goes, the more likely it becomes. Opponent fetches up a Blood Crypt. They untap. They play Renin 6, so they're going to be making all their land drops from here on out. We untap. Goryo's? World at War. Not really what I wanted. Pass the turn. Opponent cracks Wooded Foothills, gets a Stomping Ground. They untap. They animate Raging Ravine, so we'll go ahead and kill it. Actually, we're gonna take 1 hit from Raging Ravine, because if I kill it on their end step, they can't pick it up and immediately replay it this turn. I think it buys us a turn either way. Okay, but it picks up Wooded Foothills, plays the Foothills. Now we kill Raging Ravine. Alright, we untap. Goryo's. Nahiri. Well, Nahiri would have been pretty great if we had 4 mana. Opponent has a Lightning Bolt. They untap. Is it a main deck Nile Spellbomb? Because I think it's a main deck Nile Spellbomb. Okay. Yep. We untap. We draw Blood Crypt, but we're just dead. Grave Hate in the main. So we're bringing in Leyline because we're going to need it. Through the Breach, Emrakul. Collective Brutality doesn't do as much. We are going to need the Fatal Push. We'll drop the World at Wars. We'll drop the Unburial Rites. And I think I'm going to get rid of one Merchant. We're on it back. I'm going to hope Leyline is enough. It probably won't be, but I'm kind of amazed that a Goryo's deck like this doesn't exist with the power that it used to, but the longer I think about it, the more I guess it makes sense. Like, Goryo's Vengeance is an incredibly strong deck, right? It's very similar to... I mean, it was like kind of the precursor deck to Neo Brand, but without Simian Spirit Guide, and without the ability to, like, Simian Spirit Guide... Like, if Simian Spirit Guide was still legal, this deck would play 4, and then you could do things like Spirit Guide out, you could play a Swamp, double Spirit Guide, haggle your reanimation target, and then Goryo's Vengeance on turn 1 to kill your opponent. And, like, without lines like that, I think this deck is just not good enough. And I know that that's, like, really absurd, right? Because it's like, oh, well, you had, like, the hand. You had 2 of one of your best 4 ofs, and then you had 1 of every other piece you needed, right? But, like, without the extra percentage points that grants you, I just don't think that this is much worth it. So double Leyline here is absolutely worth keeping. My opponent having Grave Hate would suck, but we do get to Thrilling Discovery, and even if my opponent has Grave Hate, they can exile Emrakul, but we get to at least draw 3 cards. I'm also, like, I guess Dredge is a deck right now, but there are certain metagames, because the modern metagame is sort of cyclical. There are metagames you'll run into where no one's playing Grave Hate, and if you play a deck that relies heavily on the graveyard, you will absolutely destroy in metagames like that. It looks like my opponent kept a hand reliant on hand hate, so maybe we have a chance. Go ahead and fetch Bloodstained Mire. Get a Blood Crypt. Tapped. We untap. Draw Lightning Axe. Play Arid Mesa. Fetch with Arid Mesa. Get a Sacred Foundry. Untapped. Let's go ahead and Thrilling Discovery. We will use its ability. Discard Emrakul and Savage Beating. So, cycle everything back. We drew Goryo's, we have instant speed discard, and we have the amount of mana that we need. We just need to draw a threat. One that hopefully my opponent can't Assassin's Trophy. Well, they got green mana, and they got black mana. We untap. We've got the combo, so play Blackcleave Cliffs, pass the turn. Kind of need to hope that our opponent either casts Assassin's Trophy to start getting rid of our ley lines, or like plays a Liliana of the Veil or something. So if they play Liliana of the Veil here, and they don't have, what's it called? They don't have Surgical, then we're fine. Okay, we'll discard Velomachus. The only thing they could have is Surgical. So, they discard Thoughtseize. So, pass to their end step. We're doing this on their end step because of the Savage Beating line. Reanimate Velomachus. And we could whiff here, right? Like, if Velomachus does not spin into a Savage Beating, we draw another Velomachus. So go to combat. We are going to risk attacking our opponent. We did not hit it, so pass the turn. A little bit disappointing, but what can you do, right? Okay, we exile Velomachus. We took out the World at Wars, so we have many less targets to hit with Velomachus. I don't know if that's absolutely the right thing to have sided out, but it's the only thing I can think of. Because this deck needs all of the support cards we have, like our primary combo is a little bit fragile. Discard Velomachus. Opponent discards another Thoughtseize. 3 mana. Opponent plays Klothys. Okay. So, opponent plays a Forest. They're going to pass to their end step. We are going to Merchant and dump, or we're going to haggle and dump the Lightning Axe. Whoop. We got the Goryo's. That was pretty good. We untap. We draw. Thoughtseize. So go to combat. Attack our opponent. Okay. Velomachus finds us. Thoughtseize. That's it. Okay. Thoughtseize our opponent. I guess I could have Lightning Axed Velomachus, but like to prevent him from getting exiled. But then my opponent just hits him with Klothys. I think I cast Merchant here. Anything to encourage my opponent to downtick Liliana, or I guess use their Lightning Bolt. But yeah, maybe I shouldn't have sided out the World at Wars if I was going to be playing, if I'm still going to be playing Velomachus. It's just like, if I cut the removal, we'll die to bears. If I cut the like hand hate, we'll die to my opponent having hate for our combo. If I, there's too many things to risk here. All right, yeah, we're gonna scoop. That kind of sucks. We got the combo twice that game, and we just couldn't find a savage beating. We had one initially, and we shuffled it back into the deck, and we dug 14 cards and couldn't find a 1 of 4 card, which kind of sucks. But, I mean, had we hit it either time, we would have beaten our opponent that game. I don't know how game 3 would have gone, but I'll see you guys in round 4. Alright, this is round 4. This is a mulligan. I guess this is a keep. We will put back World at War. Opponent is on the play, so hopefully we draw some good stuff. They lead on Island into Hedron Crab. Aha! It is Mill. Come on, let me draw that Goryo's Vengeance. Lead on Thoughtseize. Surgical in your opener, huh? Yoink. Pass the turn. Opponent draws. They probably play like Field of Ruin, Mesmeric Orb. Okay, they play Island. They mill us. There's our Unburial Rights. They play Mesmeric Orb. We untap. We mill 1. We draw Thrilling Discovery. So play Arid Mesa. Crack Arid Mesa. Get Sacred Foundry. Untapped. Let's go ahead and Thrilling Discovery. We will use its ability and dump Merchant of the Veil, Savage Beating. Well, we found Velomachus. Pass the turn. Okay, opponent untaps. They mill Glimpse the Unthinkable and Fatal Push. Then they draw. They play Field of Ruin and mill us. I think they're activating Field. Okay. So we get a basic mountain. We don't have any basic mountains. We get a basic swamp. Opponent mills us. Milling Velomachus. Phoenix, if you're a 3-color deck, you need to play a basic mountain. I understand the whole Blood Moon angle, but it's precisely issues like this. Okay, play Blackcleave Cliffs. We drew the Goryos, so let's go for it. They have to not have drawn their second surgical. Unbelievable. Okay, so Through the Breach coming in, Brutality's coming in, Emrakul coming in, Leyline of Sanctity coming in. This is the problem right now with this deck. Because I think the Velomachus thing is sweet, but this is how many cards we have to win when we reanimate Velomachus. And this is how many cards we have to Goryo's Vengeance and win with Emrakul. So my options are either like dump all of these cards and play 2 reanimator targets, or keep the combo that instantly loses to surgical. Oh man. You know what? We're gonna cut that whole combo and we're just gonna play this. Because I can't think of what else to do to try and beat this mill deck. Because Leyline doesn't protect us from surgical because surgical targets a card in the graveyard. And they don't even have to have mana for that. Okay, I will keep this. I'm sorry if I'm a little bit salty. It's just like, it's situations like this that are so frustrating to me, because it's like I'm playing a cool deck and we're doing cool stuff, and we did get the combo off once, which I guess is, that's an achievement. But like, you know what would make this deck better or actually possibly playable? Faithless Looting. But it's not playable in Modern anymore, which cut a lot of the more interesting like red decks that you could play. Like, yeah, there's optimal things to do with Faithless Looting, right? Like, you can play Goryos, or not you play it in Goryos, but you play it in like Hollow One, and Hollow One is like the optimal Faithless Looting deck. Kill the crab. But like, there was a bunch of other decks that Faithless Looting just enabled. Well, there's our Obsidian. Opponent plays an Obero. They glimpse us. We untap. Draw Through the Breach. Go Magic. Blood Moon. Pass the turn. Opponent plays Soul Guide Lantern, which does cycle and potentially get them closer to a basic. I think Mill, on average, plays about 4 basics. The issue with Soul Guide Lantern is if they do end up milling our Emrakul, it is unlikely that we win because I did use Arid Mesa. I should have fetched a basic Plains. I shouldn't have gotten the Sacred Foundry. That's a huge actually player error on my part. They're gonna exile Obsidian. Alright. We untap. Come on, Plains. They haven't milled it, so otherwise we're just gonna play Merchant of the Veil and start beating down with a 2-3. We get Collective Brutality, we can't cast it. Play Merchant. Pass the turn. So This deck does have similar problems to Narset Reanimator, but Narset has one benefit that Velomachus does not, and that is Narset casts every spell that you hit off of her. Okay, we're going to dump Collective Brutality and draw Plains. Play the Plains, go to combat. Attack for 2. The good news is we can Through the Breach Emrakul. We can also play Nahiri and start looting to look for Emrakul, / just alt Nahiri. Okay, opponent does nothing, we untap. We draw Leyline, play Nahiri, loot, discard Leyline. We draw Thrilling Discovery, go to combat. Attack for 2. Play Bloodstained Mire. So that Plains was absolutely a lucky top deck. I should have, like I said, fetched it off of the Arid Mesa, but I wasn't paying enough attention. I wasn't thinking about the fact I was going to play Blood Moon. Okay, uptick Nahiri. We will loot away Arid Mesa. Draw another Merchant. Go to combat. Hit our opponent for 2. And like, I've made this complaint before, but I'm really tired of, like, if I play a jank deck, I want my jank deck. How do I describe this? I wanted to say I want my jank deck to be good, but it's not like this deck isn't good, right? This deck has an instant win combination. Like, you straight up win the game if you resolve Velomachus, like 6 out of 7 times or something crazy like that because of how many digs you get at an additional combat step. As long as we don't mill exactly Emrakul, we're fine. So go get Emrakul, go to combat. But like, the problem that I have with jank decks right now is there are so many cards that I have to play in the sideboard of jank decks that post-boarding, they all effectively amount to the same thing. Like, this game, we won because of Blood Moon and for no other reason. Which is not what this deck is meant to do. This deck has Blood Moon in the sideboard as a hedge to occasionally give it additional win percentage. I want to win with the deck's primary game plan. That's how I want to be winning. If I build a deck, I want to win with the intended way to win with the deck. I don't want to run into infinite counterspells and then happen to win with Merchant of the Veil beatdown after 400 turns because my opponent just drew only lands off of their counterspells that drew cards. Like, I want to win because I reanimated Velomachus. It's really frustrating to me when post-board I'm just now playing the Mardu, like, Tainted Aria Flame deck, effectively, because it's just, I'm just playing attrition to survive in the metagame with this occasional, like, oh, look at what I can do. That's really frustrating to me on a lot of levels. And this is no dig against the creator of this deck at all. And I would hope that other people that play jank decks like I do occasionally have this feeling, because it's like I want the deck to stand up on its own merits every now and again. Not because it's playing Blood Moon, not because it's playing a million Thoughtseizes or a million Inquisitions and just takes all of its opponent's action and gets 10 million turns to set up its game plan that is way too convoluted. I want to win with whatever I designed the win condition to be. And every time I don't do that, it's frustrating. Because it feels like, especially when I'm making content for this deck, like, I'm playing this deck because the viewers want to see me reanimate Velomachus, take infinite combat steps, and kill my opponent. And doing anything else with this deck, leading up to that point, feels disingenuous. Like, if I win with Blood Moon every game that I win, people are going to be like, oh, you just built a Blood Moon deck. You built a bad Blood Moon deck. Because there's a better way to build Blood Moon, right? And I don't know. I'm going to stop ranting about this, and I'm going to try and focus to actually shore up and win this game. We're going to fetch a Sacred Foundry because we may need white mana before this is up. I'm going to discard Leyline of Sanctity. I just realized that Leyline of Sanctity doesn't even work versus Ruin Crab, because Ruin Crab says each opponent. My opponent has fetched up their basics, so the Blood Moon plan's not actually going to work here. Let's haggle, ditch Moon. We draw Through the Breach, play a Swamp, pass the turn. So like here, we're really close to the primary game plan, right? The problem is if my opponent mulliganed to Surgical, like if their last card in hand's not a land, it's definitely a Surgical. So the correct choice for me is to tap for black here so that I mill 2, because if I untap and I hit if I hit, what do you call it? I was going to say if I hit any of my legendary creatures, I want to be able to Goryo's. So opponent untaps, mills Drowning Lock. They play Soul Guide Lantern, which means our Goryo's Vengeance plan is not going to work. So now I'm probably on the Through the Breach line. We can still try it, but opponent decides to exile Blood Moon for some reason. I don't know, and maybe I'm thinking even more about it. Maybe my complaint is not necessarily valid, right? Like maybe, do we rip apart this Soul Guide Lantern? Go to combat. I think I rip apart Soul Guide Lantern. They can cycle it to draw, but I'm pretty sure they have surgical, so like maybe hitting the Mesmeric Orb here is better, but I don't know. What was I saying? Right. So maybe my complaint here isn't actually a valid thing, because otherwise why did decks have sideboards, right? Like, why does every white deck that I play have Auriok Champion or Core Firewalker in the sideboard, right? And so if you run up against burn, you have a reason to actually, or you have a way to actually win versus a hyper aggressive burn deck, right? And all right, here we go. Reanimate Emrakul. No surgical extraction, please. Okay, they have Drown in the lock, so they counter Gorios, we shuffle back in, then we mill a Bloodstain. We draw a Lightning Axe, go to combat, attack for 2, opponent no blocks, so I'm going to kill this Hedron Crab so we don't get milled anywhere near as fast. Pass the turn. But like, by my argument, personally, I would be the most satisfied if I was playing Core Firewalker in a Soldier deck or a Core deck, like a tribal deck that had a reason to be running a double white bear that completely counters burn, right? I guess what I'm saying is I want more niche sideboarding options to fit with more niche decks. Like, I want stuff that's situationally powerful to exist in Modern, rather than things that are just objectively powerful for, like, every situation. I don't know. I tend to make similar complaints to that a lot. Play a second Merchant of the Veil. We're going to get there with 2-3 beats. Hit our opponent for 2. Pass the turn. Like, I made this argument at the end of Snakes. Like, why can't I play, I don't know, some Snake tribal sideboard option, right? Like, why doesn't Snakes have a 1-mana back to nature, right? Or, like, that sort of thing. Like, why can't I have these weird... Or, like, how about if I play tribal Elks, I can play a smokestack effect in Modern? Like, something crazy, right? And that's the kind of stuff that I want them to print in these Modern Horizon 2, Modern Horizon 3 sort of sets, right? But that's not what they're going to print. Alright, we shuffle everything back in. We shuffle everything back in. We draw Blood Moon. Play Blood Moon. Pass the turn. Now we have to hope that my opponent can't play the cards they draw, which is a wonderful place to be, right? Or we have to draw a Rip Apart to get through this Ensnaring Bridge. If my opponent mills themselves before they mill us, off of double Mesmeric Orb, I'm going to consider that a moral victory. But, like, there goes one of our Rip Aparts. No, I don't actually want to do this. Pass the turn. So, I guess one of the things I'm actually complaining about here is when, in this game, effects are supposed to be divided up amongst the color pie. And it's supposed to be relatively even to each color, but something as complex as the color pie, odds are it won't be. And that's okay. But what this means is effects should also, within those colors, be as divided up in as many mechanically unique and interesting ways as possible. Like, each tribe should have a unique identity, you know. Each brand of instant and sorcery should have a unique identity. And they really missed an opportunity with Magic to not give instants and sorceries more subtypes. Like, why isn't Lightning Bolt a lightning spell? Or, you know, Firebolt a fire spell, that sort of thing. They really missed a lot of cool opportunities with stuff like that. But it's something they really should have done. To give more incentives to play different subsets of cards rather than what is just the most powerful. Like Champion of the Parish is an excellent, narrow, aggressive card. It fits only in a humans deck, although occasionally it can fit in a, what would you call it? Like an ally deck or 1/1 counter deck. Like, there's some synergies there, right? But if, I don't know, I just want more narrow payoffs for powerful cards. That's all. So this comes down to whether or not my opponent ever gets 2 cards stuck in hand. And every basic land they play is 1 more card not stuck in their hand. We draw Nahiri. So Nahiri is awesome. The only problem is Nahiri cannot exile untapped artifacts. Okay, we draw an Obsidian, which we can't cast. But I can ditch it to Nahiri and then flashback on Burial Rites to get it. And then flicker my opponent to death. which I would accept as a valid way to win for this deck, because Obsidat is one of the creatures we're trying to reanimate. And we did. We reanimated to win the game. And this would be a satisfying game if I win that way, to me, personally. The thing I've been complaining about this entire time. Alright, we untap, draw Bloodstained Mire, uptick Nahiri, discard Obsidat, Unburial Rites, Obsidat, drain my opponent, pass the turn. Yep, flicker it. Because now my opponent's on 2 turns to try and kill us. They untap and mill. They play an island and mill us. They mill Emrakul, which shuffles everything back in, and that should be the death knell for our opponent. I mean, we could Thrilling Discovery and try to hit Rip Apart to just kill our opponent on the spot, but there's really no reason. So there goes Rip Apart number 1. We get back Ghost Dad, drain our opponent, down to 2, draw Fatal Push, and pass the turn. Flicker Obsidat, pass the turn. So if we untap and my opponent hasn't gained life in any way, we win. But if they're holding Crypt Incursion, this will be a much longer game. Alright, we got there. And we won the match. And we won the match by reanimating Obsidat, which is all I asked for this entire rant. Alright. I'll see you guys in round 5. Alright, we get to be on the play for round 5. We have all of our colors of mana, we have reanimation spells, but we have no way to discard, and we don't have Velomachus, so we're going to mulligan. This is a bit worse. This is technically better. Put back Savage Beating, put back Blackcleave Cliffs, and we are going to play Arid Mesa, fetch, shock Blood Crypt, and Thoughtseize our opponent. Ah, the old counterspell deck. Pass the turn. Opponent untaps, plays an island, casts Serum Visions. We untap, draw Blackcleave Cliffs, play Bloodstained Mire, pass the turn. Opponent plays Polluted Delta, opts, crack Bloodstained Mire, get a Sacred Foundry. We untap, draw Blood Crypt, play Blackcleave Cliffs, pass the turn. I will likely Valakut Awakening, putting back Blood Crypt, because I probably won't need it unless I'm drawing Nahiri. Opponent fetches up a Steam Vents tapped. They untap. They play Polluted Delta, which is a land we didn't know they had, but they somehow still have 6 cards in hand. Valakut Awakening. Alright, we've got the combo. We untap and draw World at War. Do we just go for it? My opponent has 6 cards in hand. Odds are one of them is a counterspell. I guess if we go for it, we try and go for it on my opponent's end step. Pass the turn. Glad I didn't go for it. When an Archmage's Charm to draw cards, they play a Scalding Tarn. Okay. On their end step, haggle, discard Velomachus. We draw Bloodstained Mire. Reanimate Velomachus. They opt in response. Hopefully they don't have a counterspell. It resolves. They could have Double Bolt. We untap and draw Thoughtseize. I am going to cast Thoughtseize. Not sure what they could have at this point. They bolt us. They crack Scalding Tarn. Okay, Emrakul, Emrakul. Take Emrakul, they can shuffle all that back in, but they have nothing now. Play Bloodstained Mire, go to combat. Attack with Velomachus, come on, extra combat step. Well, we found World at War. Cast World at War. Okay, we hit them for 5. Untap. After the first post-combat main phase this turn, there's an additional combat phase. After the first post-combat phase, so if you cast another World at War, it doesn't work. Okay, we untap, go to combat, attack. So I was going to say, if I hit another World at War, I think that we're done. So Savage Beating, and this should kill our opponent. Go to combat, attack for 10, and we got there. This is what we came here to do. This feels good. We won with the combo, no matter how jank, even against a deck full of counterspells. Alright, so this deck we definitely want Collective Brutality and Silence against. Fatal Push we can take out, and we can probably get rid of Unburial Rites. Probably get rid of Obsidat. and I can get rid of like one Thrilling Discovery because we brought in Collective Brutality as an additional discard outlet. Alright, well we've got the Collective Brutality, we've got the Silence, and we've got Velomachus, so I'm going to keep this. We just need to find the Gorios. Lead on Blackcleave Cliffs, pass the turn. Opponent plays a Mountain, passes, we untap, draw Merchant, play Blackcleave Cliffs. Let's go 2 modes, ditch Velomachus, duress our opponent. If they only get 1 counterspell in hand, that's fine, because we have Silence. They remand it. Okay, pass the turn, opponent untaps. They play Polluted Delta, we untap, draw Bloodstained Mire, play Sunbaked Canyon, go ahead in 2 mode, ditch Savage Beating. Okay, opponent cracks Polluted Delta, Prismari Command, they're going to loot and make a treasure. Okay, in theory this ramps them and allows them, if they have 2 Through the Breaches, they could Through the Breach, and we would lose. They have Through the Breach Emrakul and remand. So we take Through the Breach, because otherwise we just die. Opponent untaps, they draw, they play Scalding Tarn, and they pass. Let's go ahead and haggle. Ditch Bloodstained Mire, we get a Thoughtseize. Untap, draw Goryo's Vengeance. Play Bloodstained Mire, fetch with Bloodstained Mire. Gonna thin our deck, get a Swamp. We'll lead on Thoughtseize. If my opponent remands the Thoughtseize, we silence in response. So now they get to draw. And then we Goryo's Velomachus. And hopefully we get the win here. Go to combat. Attack. Okay, we hit Savage Beating. So untap all creatures. Get another combat phase. Hit our opponent for 5. We untap. We attack. We hit World at War. We've not gotten to the first post-combat main phase yet, so this should work. But if we hit another World at War instead of Savage Beating, then I think we lose. Velomachus. Okay, so here's where we find out if that works or not. Take our opponent to 1. Oh, okay. It does work. After the first post-combat main phase this turn. That strikes me as another one doesn't work, is what I read there. But creatures you control gain double strike. Hey, beat Through the Breach. Better Through the Breach deck discovered. Alright, I'm glad we won 1 round with the combo that is so incredibly great for my mood overall. I don't mind so much, I don't mind so much that this is considered like a suboptimal main deck plan. You know, even like for Gorios, there's always a better Gorios target. There's always a better Through the Breach target. My only problem with this deck is that the primary game plan requires 12 cards, and none of those 12 cards are castable in any realistic amount of time without dumping them into the grave. We are even more graveyard reliant than, like, I think Neo Brand is, which is saying something. However, if you want to play a deck with Velomachus, I still would not recommend this one. I played a Velomachus Polywarp deck, and that deck, I believe, is better than this one. Not because it's playing blue, but because the 5-mana Time Warps, like Time Warp is still such an excellent effect that you can cast it even if you don't have the combo. It draws you another card deeper. You potentially can play another land so that you can set up for maybe the combo plus a disruption spell of some kind. I think that is a much better deck than this one that has a very, very similar game plan. Interesting that World at War works this way. It might actually be bugged on Moto with the wording that it has, because to me it sounds as though a second World at War in a turn would not give you another combat phase. But I could be wrong. I could be worded weird, and I don't know English that well, despite being a primary speaker of English. Other than that, I think instead of going the reanimation route for a deck like this, it might be better to go like with a bunch of rituals into a Through the Breach. Just try and go like Turbo Breach, play Velomachus, play Emrakul in the main deck, play a bunch of extra combat step cards. I don't know if it's better because it technically increases the mana cost of this deck by a lot. I think Nahiri is great in a deck like this because she loots away your things that you don't want to have in hand, that you want to have in the grave, and draws you extra cards. I think she's a little slow for the current metagame, but either way, I think this is a cool deck. It's very similar to one of my favorite decks of all time, which was Narset Reanimator. And so it was good to have
similar experience to that once again in the modern format. I think there are better builds of this deck. I just don't really, I don't really have the brain power to work on it right now in the wrap up. And I think the Polywarp deck is technically better. That deck needs some work too. And if you want to know what in that deck I've mentioned a lot of things you can change in the wrap up. Either way, I'm really glad that we won 2 games. I'm really glad that we won 2 games with our actual primary game plan. But yeah, Phoenix, Sigma, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and everybody else, and obviously Phoenix and Sigma included, you're all wonderful human beings, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Bye!
Hey, just wanted to give a shout out to my patrons for the month of May. If you want to support my channel directly and have your name show up in this list, there's a link to my Patreon in the description down below. Thank you all.